Welcome to Navigating Life with Neurodiversity, a podcast about identity, healing, and honest conversations for those who feel deeply, think differently, and live uniquely. My name is Matt, and I'm glad you're here. ADHD. 4 little letters that can carry a surprising amount of weight, misunderstanding, and often shame. But here's the truth. ADHD is neither a character flaw or a discipline problem. It is a legitimate neurodevelopmental condition with very real, measurable effects on how the brain functions, particularly around attention, impulse control, emotional regulation, and executive functioning. So let's start with the basics. What is ADHD? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Though frankly, the name does it a disservice. It is a bit misleading. Many individuals with ADHD don't actually have a deficit of attention. They have a surplus. They often have too much attention, directed in too many directions at once. It's not that the mind isn't paying attention, it's that it's paying attention to everything, all at once, which is pretty exhausting. ADHD is categorized under neurodevelopmental disorders, meaning it originates in early development, often before the age of 12, though it can go unnoticed well into adulthood, particularly in women and those with the inattentive presentation. There are 3 main recognized presentations of ADHD. Number 1, primarily inattentive type, and they have trouble with focus, organization, memory, and follow through. Number 2, primarily hyperactive impulse type, characterized by restlessness, impulsivity, and difficulty sitting still or waiting. Or thirdly, a combined type, which features of both inattentiveness and the hyperactivity/impulsivity presentations. It is an important note that ADHD isn't static. A person might appear hyperactive as a child, but shift into more inattentive struggles in adulthood. It evolves, often camouflaged by coping mechanisms. So what's going on in the brain? Think of ADHD like a Ferrari. Powerful, fast, capable of brilliance, but it's gone without brakes. At the neurochemical level, ADHD involves dysfunctions in the dopaminergic and the noradrenergic systems, 2 neurotransmitters heavily involved in reward, motivation, attention, and emotional regulation. People with ADHD tend to have lower levels of dopamine availability, which impacts the brain's ability to prioritize tasks, delay gratification, or stay focused on something that isn't immediately rewarding. It's not laziness or disinterest. The reward circuits just aren't lighting up in the same way. So there's several key areas that get affected, the main being executive functioning. This is the command center of the brain, largely governed by your prefrontal cortex. That's responsible for planning ahead, organizing, starting tasks and finishing them, managing time, regulating emotions, and switching attention appropriately. In ADHD, these systems are often impaired, which is why someone might know what they need to do, yet still not be able to do it. This is not a willpower issue, it's a neurological bottleneck. The next being emotional regulation. People with ADHD often experience emotions more intensely. This isn't talked about enough. It's called emotional dysregulation, and it's one of the most misunderstood elements of the disorder. Imagine a brain that feels shame, frustration, or excitement like a flash flood. What others shake off in minutes might knock someone with ADHD sideways for hours or even days. Another one is time blindness. To the ADHD brain, now is everything, and not now barely exists. This means tasks not immediately in front of you can feel unreal or distant, even if they're urgent. This is why time management is so difficult, not because the person doesn't care, but the internal sense of time is fundamentally different. At this midpoint, I hope it's become very clear that I put an awful lot of time and research into some of these posts. If you or someone you may know may benefit from the insights shared within this episode, please like, subscribe, share it around. How does ADHD get diagnosed? Well, diagnosis is clinical. It isn't done with a blood test or a brain scan, though we do have some quite fascinating neuroimaging studies that show the differences in ADHD brains. Instead, clinicians rely on detailed interviews, behaviour rating scales, history taken, and often collateral information from family, partners, or teachers. Importantly, symptoms must cause impairment in 2 or more settings, like school, work, or home, and can't be better explained by something else, such as trauma, anxiety, or learning disorders, although ADHD often coexist within these 3. There are comorbidities. So comorbidities is the medical term for sort of unusual tag-alongs. ADHD rarely shows up alone. Some of its most common companions include anxiety disorders, depression, oppositional defiant disorder in children, autism spectrum disorder, there is a significant overlap in the 2, learning disabilities, sleep disturbances, rejection sensitive dysphoria. Not in the diagnosed mainstream, but it is heavily reported. So let's talk about adults for a moment. Many adults with ADHD are undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, or have lived their lives internalizing their struggles as personal failings. They often hear things like, "You're so smart, why don't you just try harder?" Or, "You're just lazy, you never finish anything. Why are you always late?" These criticisms chip away at the person's sense of self. Over time, many adults develop crippling self-doubt, perfectionism, burnout, and shame, and it sticks like tar to every endeavor. It is heartbreaking, but it isn't irreversible. So how do we treat and manage? Well, medications, so stimulants like methylphenidate, for example, Ritalin, Concerta, and amphetamines like Adderall or Elvance. They're the gold standard of medications. They work by increasing dopamine and norepinephrine availability in the key brain areas. But there are non-stimulant options. For example, atomoxetine or guanfacine are also available, especially when anxiety or side effects are an issue. And then you have the therapy approach. So CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, can help reframe unhelpful beliefs and help you develop practical skills. Coaching is often helpful for building structure, accountability, and goal setting. But trauma-informed approaches are essential when shame, masking, or past abuse are involved. Now, there does need to be lifestyle changes. Sleep is non-negotiable. ADHD brains are more sensitive to sleep debt. There's the nutrition and exercise that can help regulate mood, focus, and energy. And then the external structures, for example, reminders, calendars, to-do lists, timers that can support internal deficits. So we've discussed what ADHD is. Let's quickly touch on what ADHD is not. It's not a trend, it's not fashionable, it's not an excuse, it's not a made-up condition for people who just need to try harder. It is real, biological, measurable, and treatable. But let's not forget that ADHD brings more than just chaos. There's often a unique intensity to life, a zest, a creativity, a capacity for hyperfocus that could unlock genius-level insights when directed. People with ADHD are often visionary, empathic, intuitively creative. They bring high energy, or they're resilient, mostly because they've had to be. They can bring a firecracker energy into rooms that need fresh thinking, but they also need systems and understanding, not to tame them, but to support them. So if you or someone you love is living with ADHD, know this, that you're not broken or they're not broken. Your brain isn't wrong, it's just wired differently. It may need scaffolding in places where others have stairs. But once you know your blueprint, you can stop blaming the structure and start building with it. Understanding ADHD is like getting the instruction manual to a ship you've been sailing blindfolded. Suddenly the storms make sense. Once you know how it works, you can learn to sail it brilliantly. Thanks for listening to Navigating Life with Neurodiversity. If this episode resonated, follow on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Share it with someone you care about or leave a review. It all helps more than you know. Until next time, be kind to yourselves.